So I'm Justin Korby. I'm the owner of Stoneman Brewery. I started one of the smallest breweries in the entire Northeast back in 2012. So we're headed into our, I guess this would be our 12-year anniversary. Yes, 2024. So I basically started, I started off as a home brewer, and I actually was a stonemason before then. So one of the reasons why my name is Stoneman is because I was a stonemason. I thought it would actually be easier to build a brewery than continue stonework, but I'm really not sure. From being in business for 12 years, it's a lot of work. So I basically came to the town of Coleraine. I've been here for about 13, 14 years. When we moved here, we kind of, there's not a lot of industry in Coleraine, so we basically went to the town and we're like, can we build a brewery in our backyard of a small rural farm? And in Coleraine, there's a variance where you can have a small business from your home. Like, I couldn't build a huge factory in my backyard, but it's one of the reasons why I built a pretty small brewery here, because the town let me build a brewery in my backyard. So the big draw to why I started my company was because there was a new company called Valley Malt, and they're a malting company that basically processes the grain you grow to be able to turn it into beer. And before 2010, 11, you really couldn't make small batches of beer from all local ingredients. So this company allowed a farmer to grow grain and literally turn it into beer, because before then it really wasn't possible. And so that was kind of my mission statement from the very beginning, is I wanted to, grow beer. As it's actually, my website name is growbeer.com. But basically, I started off, and I've been one of the only breweries brewing with about 100% local ingredients in every single batch of beer I do. And I actually started the first beer CSA in the country. So a beer CSA, it stands for Community Supporting Agriculture. And essentially, a lot of farmers use the CSA model. And actually, the CSA was actually started in the 70s in Western Massachusetts originally. The concept came out where basically, with a farmer, you would pay the farmer ahead of time for a certain amount of food, during the summer to come pick up. Because really, the farmer needs all their capital in the wintertime to buy seeds, to buy fertilizer, and then it's all labor after that. So this was a way that farmers would get money ahead of time to be able to then produce stuff. And so opening up a brewery with no real money, I used the same model. So people paid me ahead of time, originally for an entire year's worth of beer, and then I would brew beer and they'd come pick it up once a month. So I still run a beer CSA. I started, it's the first beer CSA in the entire country, and it's kind of half of my business model. But that allowed me to get started and to build, real tiny brewery. But one of the neat things about my setup is that I basically, even with a small brewery, most people would have like one or two flavors of beer that they release. But I actually have like all these smaller fermenters, so I'm able to do like 8 or 9 different varieties of beer. I have a fermentation room set up that controls the temperature, and I use a heat exchanger, so it basically is like an air conditioner and a heater all at once. And so I can control the temperature, and essentially with fermentation, it really is all about having control of the temperature. I mean, with beer, you're basically making like a barley tea, by steeping grain in water, boiling it, adding hops. But really the magic happens when you add yeast to it. And then you have to basically, depending on the type of beer, you can ferment it for, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes, months. I have one beer that I just released after 2 years. With fermentation, it really is, for making good beer, you have to use really good ingredients, but then you have to actually control the temperature of the yeast in the beer when it ferments. Because actually when you pitch the yeast, and it's like for the first 3 or 4 days, it gets like really active and bubbling, and it'll actually raise the temperature in the vessel, and you really want that temperature to stay in a certain range. I mean, it's kind of the fun part about being a brewer. It's like being a cook, and you're using different yeast strains to get different flavors. But even with specific yeast strains, you can actually use different temperature to get different flavors to make it like more estery or less estery, depending on the style of beer. I've always been a creative person. Like, I went to art school for 1 year. Then the idea of making, like, having a small business it seemed achievable for me. Like I don't have money, like I couldn't build a huge brand new brewery, but building a small farm brewery kind of seemed just in my grasp to be able to do. But then really as a creative person, this is like almost like an art project that I do here, where it's all about telling stories. I mean, where I make beers with different ingredients, different times of the season. I brew beers with other people in collaboration, and we do like projects to promote, other events and other people's projects. And so using beer as like a kind of a catalyst to basically tell the story or to get people together. I mean, throughout history, beer always brings people together. And so kind of being able to like create a product to sell, but then there's a lot more to it than just that. Really being able to hone skills to be able to make a product and sell is one fun part, but it's kind of almost an excuse to do all these art projects. Making mistakes is part of the process. I mean, you have to learn from mistakes. I mean, that's essentially how I built my brewery and run my company, is by making hundreds and hundreds of mistakes, but learning from them. And so some things where, I mean, it's never ending. You're always learning lessons. So one specific thing was I had expanded from this brewery and I was renting other breweries. I mean, I was a 1-barrel system, so I make it like 31 gallons of beer in every batch of beer. But I went from a 1-barrel system to doing 50-barrel batches of beer. So that's, thousands of gallons of beer at once. And I had a distributor, and I was selling all over Massachusetts. Like I was doing this in around 2016, 2017 to basically be able to expand off my farm. Like I basically got tired of working by myself, and I got tired of being really small. And so I basically rented other breweries to make beer on a larger system to basically get my name out there, to become bankable, to then build a new facility. And so during this, I would do a beer, and so much of everything is like with labels. You have to have your labels up to code. You have to put barcodes on your labels. And, you have to order these UPC barcodes online. And I would order like 10 at a time. I mean, they're digital files. And I put them on my desktop. And, computers aren't my strength. And I basically used a barcode, but I didn't rename the file. And so then I used the same barcode for another beer. And I'm talking like 4 pallets worth of beer. I mean, we're talking, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of beer. And I had it sent to a distributor, and I got a phone call, and the distributor is like, hey, we can't sell your beer. Your barcode was the same for this other product. What are you going to do about it? And I'm like, oh man. So I called up my guy at Sunrays, and I made all these little tiny like laminate stickers, and I had them printed like a rush job, had them printed. And then actually my parents came with me to a cold walk-in warehouse, and basically we had 2 full pallets, thousands of beers, and we had to unload by hand every single box and put on a sticker over the barcode, and then reseal up the boxes. It took us all day long. But so that was one mistake that you think you would learn from. I did that one other time. I'm working with the Rendezvous, and they're in Turner's Falls, and the guy Chris Janke was kind of like a business mentor, and I met him at like a business meeting, and we really hit it off. And basically I gave him the pitch, because I brew. It's fun for me to brew beer for other people, like other like restaurants or bars, but it's not fun just to do one beer and sell it to all these places. Like I wanted to do something very specific. And so like when the Root Cellar existed underneath the place of that one bar in Greenfield, I brewed their house beer. And so I brewed a beer for them called the Root Cellar Pale Ale, where it's custom made by me, only sold there. So I mentioned this to the Rendezvous, and I was like, I could do a custom beer for you. And so they came up here a few weeks ago, and we did a pale ale, and it's called the Voo Valley Pale Ale. And we're going to be releasing this. By the time this is airing, it'll probably be on draft at the Rendezvous. And the middle to end of June, we're going to be doing a Good Food Award release party, and we'll have a bunch of my beers on tap there. If you go to my website or my social media, I'm running a campaign because I just received a grant. So it's a $20,000 matching grant. So I'm doing a crowdsourced funding campaign to raise another $20,000 or more to be able to expand here, to get a couple new shipping containers, get a keg washer, some new equipment to make it easier to be a one-man business. So I'm, if you're willing to help out, you can always donate money to my campaign.